so we can put it in our portal. So welcome. Super glad you're here. We're expecting a few more people. So if they show up, we will welcome them in. But let's just do a quick connect here so Michael, you've got this performance appraisal work group in the city of Milpitas. So your hope to be here is to bring some information back about that. Is that correct? Or tell me how can I best meet your needs today?
Sure. So recently the city undertook a survey citywide about some of the items that this staff is kind of concerned about. And I think one of the main concerns was how their performance is appraised.
Yeah.
And that led to the creation of a performance approval process. And that, ironically, through our Coaching for Excellence, it sounds like there's some instruction in regards to connecting, being able to think about enhancing performance through this. I don't know how to say it. It sounds like there could be employees could have a certain, maybe, I won't say sense of humor, but maybe you're better at this than I am, Claire. Just there's things that should be discussed that aren't directly performance to the job,
okay,
but affect the team.
Okay.
And it sounds like that those items can be discussed by not singling out the person. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yes. So let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. So there's things that happen in the performance appraisal that are about the job performance. That's one set of things. There's a lot of other stuff that happens that should be related more to like team culture or how we do things around here or something like that, which sometimes a leader only identifies that those should be talked about because one person is kind of violating the norms.
Yes.
Okay. So what the leader often does is either they go to the very person and they talk to them about those very things. And that makes sense sometimes. Other times they need to do kind of a reset of their culture, or they need to make expectations clear with the whole team or something like that. And that corrects the problem. But knowing the difference between those two things is not always totally obvious. But anyway.
You kind of nailed it. It's just, I think with a high functioning culture, it'll drive performance.
Right.
But there's other ways to drive performance.
Right.
And some people
I like the way you're saying that, Michael. Yeah.
Right.
So building that high performance culture, right, drives performance. But sometimes it's the one-to-one that you need to do to adjust a particular person's performance. Yes.
Yeah. There's a term I liked. You may be certified, but you're not qualified.
Oh.
This performance enhancement can qualify you to be doing certain things that you're already doing. Even if you think you're doing it right, you probably could do it. So that's why I'm interested in this performance appraisal.
Okay, very good. How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think for me, obviously Ethan came over here to the city of Pleasant Hill about maybe 7 or 8 months ago now. And so, I think he wanted to explore this with his new team here. So he took over as community development director, deputy city manager. And I think he's been in conversation with our human resource department, talking about this kind of, process. And I think he has 3 people under him, direct reporting. I'm with the building department, and then we've got planning and engineering. And I think he wanted to explore that opportunity to do that, and so he's kind of putting it out there. So I'm always interested in learning different ways of doing performance and operating in his team. And of course, I haven't been here that long, so I kind of took over as the chief building official right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
And so I was, at the time, the city manager was my boss, my immediate boss. And she essentially just said, all that stuff you talked about in your interview process, which was prior to the pandemic, just go do it.
Go to it.
forward and do all those things. So there was a lot of, change that was still carrying out, but, I was introduced to a team that, kind of doing things, as they say, old school.
Yeah.
Paper, a lot of old
Yeah.
process. And we've been turning it around and changing it. So it's been a lot of fun
Yeah.
for me so far. And now that Ethan's on board, I think it's great that we've got a person that embraces this kind of opportunity. So
Yeah.
I'm all for
Excellent.
it.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So let's talk about, and I'll just say this for the recording, but so I've been teaching coaching skills for many, many years. I mean, I don't know, a couple decades probably. But it wasn't until maybe 2015, I think, that we started, that I worked with the city of Walnut Creek. And at that time, Fran Robustelli was she was the HR director, and then she moved into the ACM role. But at that time, she was really committed to creating a culture of coaching. I met her through MRG. I came on with her and her team, her HR team. And over the course of from 2015 to maybe 2018 or so, we assessed the organization. We built a comprehensive coaching program called Coaching for Excellence. We built a companion program to that called Being Your Best at Work, which is for people who are going to receive coaching. We revised the process from being an annual performance appraisal that was tied to compensation and other things. We revised and replaced that process with a quarterly coaching process, including creating a form for people to capture notes and things like that for coaching, which replaced the performance appraisal form. So the parts to this are, and we'll talk about this because I have a little presentation I can go through with you, just high level, just to kind of scope this out. But the parts are teaching people how to coach. That's one thing, how to coach and be coached, which, as you know, as being part of Coaching for Excellence, involves how do we get our priorities straight? How do we set goals around things? How do we manage expectations? How do we talk to people about those goals and move them forward on goals? And how do we manage performance issues? And how do we set culture? And a whole body of things that go on. So we created a course. We piloted the course. We trimmed the course a little bit. We ran it again, et cetera. And then we trained all the managers, and then we trained all the employees. So the thing that made that particular project very successful, all of us kind of agree, kind of looking back, and I'm talking with Fran now at the new city, where she's the city manager, about doing this with again. And in our conversations, it's all very clear that one of the key components of this is actually teaching people the skill of coaching and teaching people how to be coached, so that everybody opts into the same kind of agreement, which is, oh, we're going over to coaching. It's not just the managers learning skills and then doing it unto their employees. It's actually coaching teams and organizations within the organization about how to work together toward clarity and goal achievement, which involves coaching, right? So when you take that kind of an approach, it makes a world of difference. People opt into it. They kind of see the value in it. They see the benefit. So today, my hope was just to kind of walk you through some of the reasons for doing that, and then some of the ways to do it, the reasons for it and the ways to do it, and then to just open it up and talk to you about what you think about this, and where it, the readiness of your organization to do these things, and so some of the metrics for how we look at this. So all that is just part of this very short kind of presentation I have. And then we can, we'll just talk about what makes sense for you guys and what questions you have. How does that sound? Good.
That's good.
Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And again, I am sort of thinking about this through the lens of other people who are going to watch this recording later and thinking, okay, how can I kind of organize this? So I'm logical about the information. Okay.
Claire, I wanted to share just some immediate feedback.
Yeah.
There's someone I work with really closely, and she's in a high ranking position. And ironically, she talks about some of the culture challenges we have here.
Yeah.
And she brings up her a previous job at Walnut Creek.
Oh, she does.
And she talks about, I mean, she may not even know, she talks about Walnut Creek as almost as gold standard. And I started kind of putting this 2015, 2018 timeline in. And I think that's where she was a little bit on the later side.
Well, you should private chat me her name and I'll see if I know her. Okay. Yeah, do that. I like to know. I'd like to know. Okay. Yeah, because so we did the original training, and then some departments, and I will say, okay, so there's the initial like how we get this done and how we train everybody and blah, blah, blah. But there's a long tail to this kind of a project, which is all about how people keep it going in their divisions or in their departments or stuff like that. So we should talk about that a little bit. Okay, but first and foremost, I want you both to answer a question for me. So Michael and Jeff, you guys both evaluate others. Do you have direct reports that you have to do performance appraisals on? Is that correct?
Yes,
I don't.
You don't, Michael? And what about you, Jeff? You do?
I do.
You do. How many do you have?
4.
Okay. Once a year?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Michael, this may or may not resonate for you quite as well if you don't. And Marissa, do you have any direct reports for you? I'm sorry, I know the answer to that question, but I should have asked her anyway.
Yeah.
She will have plenty of people reporting to her in the near future, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to say, start with this. When I say it's time for your performance appraisals, what feelings and thoughts come to mind, Jeff?
Yeah, it's that time again.
Yes, it's yeah, really, is it that time again? Gosh, did that year go by so fast?
Yeah, I know, it's like, did we just do that?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
I will say, when I came into this position, I have an incredible team. So I'm really, really fortunate. And I have experienced, some of the things that you talked about in the classes that we've been doing over the last 5 weeks or 5 times, where I've, seen the good, bad, and the ugly out there. And I am just super, super fortunate that I have the team that I have.
Nice.
But it makes it so much easier when you have the right people.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you stepped into that, Jeff, but I'm sure, again, a team can go south real fast if they don't have the right leader. So.
It can. I mean, so 2 of the people, I inherited when I got here. One person has retired. No, I had 2 that are still here. A third person that retired. I've hired 2 people, and both persons are really great. One of them actually followed me from the last job I was in.
Great.
So, yeah. So I mean, but it's, I've just been really fortunate because the people that were here prior to me jumping on board, they've been very supportive, and we immediately started changing a lot of things. And I was, somewhat gentle about doing it. I mean, obviously change can be a big deal, but they were just very supportive.
Good. Michael, any feelings or thoughts come to mind for you as the recipient of these performance appraisals?
Yeah, for years I have been asked to just write my own performance appraisal. Because the director was like, "Hey, you're doing pretty great," and I was like, "No, I'm not great sometimes. I know that much, but I'm doing good enough." So yeah.
That's actually not an uncommon experience. A lot of people have to do that. And it kind of brings up this thing. So there's a lot of common challenges with performance appraisals. I'm just going to touch on some of them. But there's been a lot of research in recent years about this stuff. Like the numeric rating scales that people use in an attempt to be objective are very subjective, because people have these like ideas about the kind of manager I am. Okay, people will say things all the time like, I don't give fives. Nobody gets a five around here because there's always room for improvement, right? And then somebody else will say, we've got to give fives because if we don't give fives, then, if it's like, I'm just saying 1 to 5, if we don't give fives, then people are gonna, then I'll have morale issue, or people won't get their step increase, or this or that or the other thing, right? So anyway, there's just a large body of research that shows that even within an organization that trains about how to use the numeric scale objectively, it's not objective. It's quite subjective because people have very different, and then you can go in, and I actually did this at a local organization here in Santa Cruz, a very large one I worked with for many, many years, where we were working, I wasn't doing coaching there, but what I was helping them with is going into these deep dive trainings about how managers could be objective about their numeric grading scale. We went in, it was overwhelming to go through, what does a 1 mean? What does a 2 mean? What does a 3 mean? A 4 and a 5? And how do those play out in all of the different roles across this entire hospital? And then training all the managers to try to be objective about these numbers. And then 2 years later, doing a recap, and nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. So the numbers are not giving you that objectivity that they're supposed to. And even beyond that, a lot of times people are not noting in the performance appraisal what they should be noting, just like what you said, Michael, where it's like asking you to do it themselves, do it yourself or whatever. That's just one symptom of this much bigger thing, which is that a lot of managers aren't paying attention to the performance over the course of the year. The year goes by really fast. And it takes too much time and resource to pay attention to that much data over a long period of time. So people don't. And then they're subject to all kinds of biases like recency bias and confirmation bias and other things where they go like, okay, if I think about that person's performance, well, 4 months ago, there was that big thing that happened, but you know what? It's been 4 months and I shouldn't really bring that up. And in the last month and a half, they've been really good. So I'll just give them a 5, right? So it's just not accurate. And it takes way too much time and resource to get something that's inaccurate, and often actually traps the manager into keeping the employee, especially in a public agency, where you have to have a lot of reasoning behind why you would ever let someone go. And when they go back and they look, and I cannot tell you how many HR managers have said this to me. When I go back and I ask the person, can you please show me the performance appraisals? You want to get rid of somebody? Well, let's go look at the performance appraisals. The performance appraisals are stellar. They're not just like normal. Oftentimes, they're often very good. Like, well, you've marked this person as average or above average for years in every performance appraisal, and now you want to get rid of now you want to manage the person out of the organization. Not going to happen anytime soon. Like, this is a long road forward. So the numeric scale is subjective. It takes too much time and resource to pay attention to it. It's usually backward looking. We're asking about what happened last year, over the course of last year. We're not setting goals and looking forward. We're looking backward. So while there can be some goodness in looking at how it went, which it doesn't have to, we don't have to take that out of the coaching, but let's just say that if we look backwards at how it had gone in the past, that's okay. But the real power of performance improvement is in looking forward and making a plan. And a lot of times the performance appraisals, unless they've been kind of revamped in the last few years, are backward looking instead of forward looking. So in general, in some, let's just say, oftentimes the feedback is untimely, it's inaccurate, and also it can be based on very little information, because people are in fact asked to do performance appraisals where they don't have any visibility to the person's actual job. So it depends on the structure of your organization, but a lot of times that is operating as well as kind of a strike against you in a sense,
Yeah, I was going to mention that, Clive, too, because we have positions such as, building inspectors. So they're very isolated, very out there on their own.
Yeah.
And then, obviously you're not following them every day. And so that, unless you're getting phone calls from customers
Yeah.
with complaints and things of that nature. You really don't know,
You don't know.
what goes on.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if I can kind of jump on that, Jeff, I recently thought about kind of just my career in government, and I think I'm still working through it. I've been thrown out. Like, I have not had my back covered
Yeah.
for so many items. And the good news, it's really turned me into someone that kind of knows a lot about a lot and knows how to manage relationships.
Yeah.
But the bad news is I've never had any support.
Yeah.
And it really, and now I thought a little bit more about these numeric ratings in my performance evaluations, and the person doing the rating has came to me and said, hey, they're already thinking, I'm going to give you this number, so next year I can give you numbers to show that there's this improvement. No empathy, no kind of like, hey, Michael, this was your goal.
Right.
Where did we get?
Right.
Not even a question. And that's been my whole career life. It's
Right.
always just like, I'm going to set you
Yeah.
up so you can get your step, and
Yeah.
you just kind of go with it, Claire. You just gotta be like, okay, thanks.
Totally. So basically, a lot of people will say, why are we doing, why? Like, if I ask the question, and I do, and I go and consult with a lot of organizations and say, why are you doing these things? It's like, well, because people need some feedback. Well, okay, they definitely need some feedback. I will agree with that all day long. But is this getting them where you want them to go in any way, shape, or form? Like, show me the data on, is this moving the needle in any way? Is the time that you're investing in it, is it paying off? So here's because there's a lot of time and resource, and depending on your organization, again, a lot of times, so just imagine you got a team of people, each one of them has to kind of do a performance check-in. You as the manager have to do a performance check-in. A lot of times you have to elevate that to somebody else to sign off, or somebody, sometimes depending on where you are in the organization, you have to elevate all that to sign off. HR might have to sign off. It's like so many people are involved in that loop. It's crazy how much time and resources really invested in this. Now, some people are doing it very well, and they're taking a lot of time to give feedback. And I guess to them, I'd be like, hats off to you. And let's just kind of think about that. Is doing that once a year enough? Is doing that once a year getting you the result you want? So those are just questions. So here's some questions I like to explore when somebody is asking, right? So one, I'll ask them, are you currently using an annual numeric rating performance appraisal? Are you currently using that?
Yep.
Are you happy with your current system? And that's where we hear some of that feedback. Are you seriously considering switching to a coaching model? Like, what do you know about it? That's usually part of the conversation I have. What do you already know about coaching, and how do you see this happening? We'd start there. Do you have the buy-in of your executive team and others who make sense? So have you had any conversations about it? And all this it doesn't mean that you have to have done that, but all this is part of the process of moving the ball forward if you want to actually ditch your performance appraisal, right? So we have to think about, where is the team? Where's the organization? Do you have that buy-in of the exec team and others? How strong is trust in your organization? If you have a high trust organization, you can move a lot faster. If you have a low trust organization, it's going to be a longer timeline, because if you don't have trust, then the people who are being coached or being asked to make this kind of a change and let go of something that they're familiar with and that they think is tied to their compensation, that either is or they think is tied to their compensation and their ability to progress, that's going to be rough. Okay, so you just have to look at that as well. We look at how strong and consistent is the coaching skill among managers now. In some organizations, people have really good conversations. Whether or not they call it coaching doesn't matter. What matters is, are managers having conversations about clarity and about expectations, and do they have a good team cultures, and are they even thinking about their team culture and other things? And if those things are happening, you've got a really nice foundation. Okay. Do you have a unionized environment? That can create complexity. And does now, given whatever is going on in your organization, does now feel like the right time to even get started. So when I go in, when somebody calls me and like I'm doing this in a 2 places right now, or in the fall, this is exactly kind of where we start the conversation. We go through all those questions. So for people who are not here and they're watching this online, thinking about this, if you're thinking about changing over, think about these questions, answer these questions for yourself. I also have all these questions written out in a PDF document that I just put into the chat for you. So if you want to download that and share it with anyone, that would be appreciated. And the rest of this as well. So we start there, we talk through that stuff, we kind of get a scope. This is sort of the lay of the land conversation. What's really happening now? So Michael, these are great questions for you to take to your committee, right? To have the committee just sort of noodle on these things a little bit, like, okay, so what does the buy-in look like of the executive team? How would we evaluate trust in our organization? How do we know if people are having good conversations about feedback and clarity and stuff like that? So that's kind of like just the readiness assessment. So that's the readiness assessment for whether you think it's time to start these conversations. Then to make it simple, I basically say, let's just say that people say yes to a lot of those things. And they go like, yeah, okay, we're ready to start having the conversation and be thinking about it. Then I kind of would lay out this 3-tiered, 3 different choices. One, you can make the choice to go all in. And what that means is, well, we'll talk about what all in means, but it's basically, yes, we're going to train our people, we're going to change the form, and we're going to change the process. Okay. Or you can just take another kind of moderate approach where you just train your people to have better conversations. Let's just train people how to set clarity expectations, how to give better feedback, how to talk about, team culture. Let's just do that. The people first. I call that the people first program. Very powerful. Risks. The third one is the form and the process. Okay, so all in, people first, and form first. So let's go through those. So the all in approach, you revise the performance appraisal process. Okay, the process itself. The process being right now, let's say it's once a year, you collect all this data, you sit down and you have a one-to-one. Whatever that process looks like now, you're going to be looking at replacing that with a process that is more like you set goals at one point in the year, and then you have a coaching, then people, have coaching conversations, and you advance those goals quarterly, for example. Okay, so you do that, the process. You replace the form. So you get rid of the form, but you put a placeholder in there for people to capture notes about their coaching conversations. That's an important part. And you teach people how to coach and be coached at a minimum. Okay. If you don't even enhance that with a lot of the things that we've been talking about in our coaching class, which is, well, feedback and other stuff like that. So the all in is, let's look at all 3 dimensions of this. Let's look at the process. Let's look at the form, and let's teach people the skill. Okay. Pretty big picture approach. Most organizations want to put a little toe in once, a little bit at a time. But if you're doing this, the big watch out is just, okay, let's just make sure we have the capacity. And you don't have to do all 3 of these things all at once either. But if you're really committed to making this happen, all 3 of those things need to kind of work together. Okay, so that's how it goes. And so let me show you what happens if you just take a people first or a form first type approach. The people first idea is that you just go in and kind of like you do what we're doing in our Coaching for Excellence class. You teach people how to coach. You teach people how to have quality conversations. You can go through the channel of just like actual coaching like we're doing. Let's teach you the GROW model. Let's teach you how to set goals. Let's teach you all that stuff. Or you go through a different approach, which is kind of like creating a feedback-rich environment. And, how do you do that? So you just focus on the people and the skill building. That will take you a long way. It really will. But the main risk is that without the form to capture notes and without a process in place where there's any accountability, like, are you having these coaching conversations? you run the risk that without that structure and support, there's no uptake. So people go get the skill training and they enjoy it and it's great. And some people do it and other people just don't, they just don't pick up that ball. It's uncomfortable to learn something new and to change your management style. So if you don't have any accountability from the form or the process, there's a big risk there that sometimes it falls flat and people don't pick it up. So you have to really account for that. Okay. So that's the people first kind of risk. If you change the form and the process first, so for example, a lot of people just look at their performance appraisal form and they go like, this thing is way too complicated. Let's get rid of the numeric ratings. Let's just kind of like make it open-ended questions. Let's change that form and process. Another awesome way to go. But if you don't coach the people, for example, you run the risk of having more ineffective conversations that erode trust, right? So there is some real goodness to really thinking about this as a 3-tiered approach, even if you kind of stack it and you say, okay, look, year 1, we're just going to teach people how to coach and we'll kind of like behind the scenes, we'll kind of work on the form. Year 2, we're going to really supplement with the form and the process. And year 3, we're really going to measure or something like that. Like that's very reasonable. And in any organization that's, that has some size to it, it can be a really good way to go. Okay, so let me just pause right here. Actually, I'm going to go back to the 3 people first, the all in, the form first. What do you guys think about that? What are you thinking would be workable in your organizations, or just what are your thoughts?
I think an all in.
An all in approach.
Yeah, we haven't really talked to Ethan that much about coaching. We've in our managers meeting with him. We touched on it a little bit, but
yeah.
I think he was waiting for, to get to the conclusion of the 6 weeks and then, but I think, he's in favor of going that route. And I know doing the annual reviews, here, and elsewhere, it never seems to be great. I mean,
right.
No matter where I've been, it's never been a perfect setup.
Sure.
And it's, just because, you do spend a lot of time away from the people you report to.
Yeah.
And so, they don't get to see.
Right.
Like Michael was saying, in my past job, I did have to fill out my own, in two past jobs actually.
Yeah.
So I mean, that system doesn't really work out, and it is very consuming as far as the amount of time that people spend.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Jeff. How about you, Michael?
In order for this to work, the person you're coaching has to really believe in it, because that 3-year approach, Claire, Marissa, people come and go. Marissa may get that CEO job you're talking about because she's already qualified for it, right? And then those 3 years, you don't have it again. So I don't know. I kind of have to sit on that a little bit longer.
Yeah. I just think it's actually wise to, and again, for your committee, Michael, the idea is to help people think in terms of an appropriate scope. That's all. Just what is an appropriate scope and what are we really trying to achieve? Because people will be like, and it's great if somebody says to me, and this happens a lot, like, oh, I love that coaching skill. I think we should teach everybody how to coach. I go, great, let's do it. And how are you going to make sure that skill sticks? Do you want to make sure? Because again, in the world of training, that's always what we're thinking about is, I love training people. I will train them all day long. But really what I'm in it for is to help an organization make the changes that they're trying to make. And so first you got to kind of make the case that the existing performance appraisal is a huge sink of resources. Depending on how it's done in your organization. But man, I will tell you, I've been in some organizations where when you do the ROI on that thing, it's pathetic. People are just dumping money into the toilet, like with that performance appraisal process, the way it's often done. In other cases, it's not that bad. In other cases, people are like, no, it's okay. We have a pretty lightweight form and we have good conversations and we don't worry too much about it. Great. Then maybe in those cases, just go ahead and add a coaching skill. You're good. You're good. That'll stick. But if you have a really big organization or the process is heavy, you have to think about that. So the other thing, just so you know, is that when I did all these like really in-depth interviews in Walnut Creek about what people liked about the performance appraisal process, because it wasn't all bad. People didn't hate it. They just said it wasn't getting the impact that they wanted. But when I said, what do you like about it? They said, I like having a time with my manager when I can talk about my performance with my manager. I like knowing that I have dedicated time to discuss my job, my expectations, my performance, and my growth. And if I'm afraid that if we take away the performance appraisal, I won't have any of that time because my boss isn't going to come to me and say, let's talk about your growth and your how you can be better and be your best. Okay, so that was a huge fear, and we didn't want anybody to lose that. So I think it's really important. That's kind of another reason why we couldn't just teach people to coach and ditch the performance appraisal. You have to replace it with something that's going to help employees know that they are going to get a chance to actually talk about their performance with their manager and have that listening ear. So coaching is a much better conversation for that anyway, but you've got to have a process to support it.
Clear question for you. In your experience, have you dealt with people that feel like they don't need to be coached? Kind of like at a senior level, right?
Absolutely, all the time. Yes.
Right. So, because I can only envision the person reaches out to you, they're already kind of like, you guys are kind of thinking the same stuff. And they're like, hey, whispering that to my organization. So you get there and then you kind of see what we're dealing with. Well, if you're a building official, I could kind of see this like, hey, imagine this woman, 17 years on the job, they kind of think they got it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what I've learned in Coaching for Excellence is there's a new definition of coaching. We're partners. We're not, I'm know it all, you know a little bit. I'm gonna,
right.
Right. How do you get that, new definition across?
You train everybody. And you start with buy-in from the executive team. I mean, if you really want it done well, the executive team has to know that even if they don't feel that they need to be coached or they need to change their approach, that they are modeling for others. So it's like, if you're going to model this, I'm going to train you first, because otherwise you're going to get stuck in an awkward situation where everyone around you has been trained and they all know something that you don't know, and you don't really want to be in that situation, right? I mean, I don't say it that way, but
Totally.
But basically, this is a big selling point for the executives, and I always want to take the executive team. The thing is, with something like this, you kind of have to start at the top down. And okay, saying that, I will also say that it is very effective in certain organizations when divisions or departments are autonomous enough that you can just go into a department or a division and you can just train the team how to do a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in Coaching for Excellence. Like, how do you set team goals? In our last class, we just talked about all that team stuff. And I go like, how do you set team goals? How do you give team feedback? How do you, do all that stuff? That can be very, very effective in small groups that are cohesive and kind of work together. So it's not like, oh, do the whole organization or don't bother. It's not like that. But if you want a coaching program to replace your performance appraisal, you've got to have that buy-in, not only from the top level people, but from, if you've got a unionized environment, you have to get those unions on board, because it impacts the number one thing that they ask is like, well, how is this going to affect compensation? How are you going to know that this is happening well? How are you going to ensure that people are doing this as well as they're doing their performance appraisals? So you kind of have to come in with that partnership attitude of like, let's build a program that ensures that people are protected and getting what they need. Okay. So the last thing I just want to share with you, I'll share this one last thing. It's in the handout as well, but when you're ready for change, when you really want to do this, we like to, wow, this is hard to read. I'm sorry about that. This is, we like to walk people through a real change management approach. We don't just want to, I mean, if you have change management, change leadership capability already in your organization, we may or may not have to be part of this with you, but I haven't been in an organization yet that didn't want a little guidance and some help with how to get through the change process. So this is kind of where we start. We start with listening. We go in and we ask people, what do you like about the current performance appraisal? How's it working for you? What are some of your, complaints or gripes about it? How much time is it taking you? Are you getting the change that you want? All those questions that I showed you up front, you go in and listen, really openly listen, because I have to understand what's going on in the organization in order to build the right program for you. This is not just, it's a framework that can be applied in a lot of different ways, but the way it's going to be applied at some place like Pleasant Hill is going to be very different than the way it's applied at a place like Milpitas. As very different than the way it might be applied in the private sector or in a nonprofit world or something like that. So we have to go in and do some data collection. That's a really important place to start. And what's the scope of that? In Walnut Creek, I interviewed, I don't know, I can't even remember. I probably interviewed about 50 people. So it was a big organization, but what that means is every department, I interviewed somebody in every department, all the executives, many frontline people, and a bunch of people in between, right? So cross section. So then you want to build this coalition of sponsors and champions. You want to bring people from all over the organization to be working on this together, like Michael, like your committee. You want to bring people together to be looking at this. Then you want to make sure you pause to build that compelling vision and a burning platform and a plan and a path forward, right? So it's like, what's the vision we're going to? What's the burning platform? Why do we have to stop doing it the way we're doing it? And what's the plan for getting us there? And make sure that that's really communicated thoroughly throughout the process. I always talk about bringing on early adopters, like start with a department that's ripe and ready for it, or start with a segment of the organization that feels like it's going to generate some wins, right? And get that work going and share those early wins. I'm also not at all opposed to starting with the people who are most resistant to it. It's a lot of work to start with the people who are most resistant to it, but if you can win them over, and if you partner with them and really give them something that's workable, it helps the whole rest of the organization adopt more quickly. So bring on early adopters, right? And then again, from that segment, phase it in and scale it up. So you don't have to do everything all at once. The whole organization doesn't have to be impacted. I know even at Walnut Creek, I remember we did, they were doing some kind of an ERP rollout. And so we avoided those departments that were most impacted, and we kind of worked around that whole ERP schedule, and we balanced everything around that. And then again, align other processes. So you have to think about things like, okay, we're going to train everybody in the organization now, but then next year we're going to hire a bunch of people. How are they going to get on board with this? What are we going to do with them? So you've got to be thinking about how to do future-oriented things as well. This can be scary for an organization. I'll just say, some people look at this and they go like, oh, I'm not down for that. Just teach me how to coach, and that's all I want. Okay. And then we can hope for the best. And like you guys know, a lot of people will come on board because they want to be great leaders and they want great teams and they're willing to do the work. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. But if you really want, this little sort of bonus is called, are you ready to ditch your performance appraisal? Because I wanted to take the time to step back and look at the whole picture of ditch that and replace it with something else. And what does it really take to do that? So I think, just in general, that's how I would frame it. If you're really thinking that you're ready to let that go, then let's start the conversation early. And let's start having those early conversations with people. Let's collect a little bit of data. Only take this one step at a time. You don't have to make big commitments. Like even in Walnut Creek, the only thing we committed to up front was doing some interviews. It's like, let's talk to the executive team, some of the naysayers, let's lay this out, and then let's go do some interviews and collect some data in the organization. Let's see where we go. And there was no big commitment. After, it was like, let's just do that. We'll see. Turned out that a lot of people were ready for it. And so then we laid out the next part of the plan. Okay, what would it be like to pilot this? And even at Walnut Creek and in other places, like in Yuba City, they had forms already. I wasn't involved in the forms. They took that whole part. So there was no consulting hours around building the form. They did all that. And they just shared it with me and I worked with it. So they did the process and the form side completely, and I focused on the coaching skill, and that's how we rolled it out there. So every program and every project is unique this way. And this is really something that needs to be built for the organization and where it's at. So that is the end of my talking piece. We have about 10 more minutes, and I would love to hear if you have thoughts or questions or how you might see this moving forward for you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, that's fine. You go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. So Claire, I was going to ask, do these programs resonate in your experience, to the human resource department or building, fire? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, you mean, can they be replicated through, or do they resonate with people from?
Like Jeff, I'm going to use an example because I kind of know building a little bit since I'm a planner. They're doing inspections, they're running reports, they're adopting California building code. To do this kind of type of team building, do human resource departments reach out to you and implement it into the city? Yeah. That's my question. Okay.
Yeah. Usually it's either so I usually either get a call from human resources or from a department level director who's just a very astute leader and wants to do it.
Okay.
And then, basically it's anyone who has agency in their own working unit who wants to make this kind of change, I'm happy to work with. Because oftentimes this will start with one little department and then there's success there. And then somebody else looks on and goes like, I like the way you're doing that. I like the way you're doing that. Maybe we should kind of scale this up a little bit. That's fine too. But HR directors or any leader who cares about their culture and their people and kind of sees coach and is sort of already is coaching in a sense, like people who do this get it. They know why it's important. They know that it's important to coach their folks. Those are the people who it really resonates with. Let me just answer the replicability question because I asked it. But I have done this successfully in police departments that are very highly structured and very hierarchical. As long as the leader is kind of I'd say a forward-thinking type of person who believes in a collaborative approach to policing and anything else. So we did it in the police department at the city of Walnut Creek, and it was, let me just say, it was under Tom Chaplin, and he was amazing police chief. But it could work in any organization where the leader is committed to having quality conversations and helping people grow and develop and improve. Okay. So Michael, for you, I would say, if these are things that resonate with you and you want to talk to your committee about them, I'm happy to talk to your committee. I'm happy to redo this presentation for them. I'd be happy, whatever. We can sit down and have a conversation if that would be helpful. Or you can just share with them the handout or whatever. But if it looks like people are open to a conversation, I'm happy to have it.
No, that's great. I think the survey alone should show the employees that, hey, the executive team is really hearing people.
Yeah.
And so, and then creating the committee, right? It's kind of like,
right.
Yeah. So
Very good.
Got it.
Yeah. Jeff, thoughts?
Yeah, I think as we, wrap up our coaching sessions, this next week, we'll be talking with Ethan, and I think he's on board with, doing that.
Yeah.
And I know, I'm pretty sure he's already talked with our human resource
Yeah.
department. I'm not sure how far he's got.
Yeah.
But we'll be following up with them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Here's I'm just putting my email in the chat. Did I spell that right, Rhiannon? I mean, Marissa, I did, right? I think I did. Unless I put my glasses on, I can't really tell. Okay, it's good.
Yeah, it's good.
So, yeah, and I'm sure we will follow up about that. So thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate you. I'm so glad. And thank you, Marissa, for showing up as you always do. You make my day. But I hope you got something useful from this, and just know that this framework is kind of an important way to be thinking about a scale, a change at that scale,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I share some quick feedback? It's regarding your email address.
Yeah.
And I think, Marissa, remember I had asked you, sometimes I get confused if I should send an email to support at Claire Laughlin, to Claire at Claire Laughlin. So, but for this particular thing, Claire at Claire Laughlin Online is kosher, right?
It's totally right. And support at Claire Laughlin Online goes to Marissa, and Marissa tells me everything that comes in there. So
Okay.
it's completely fine.
We're just trying to sharpen it, girl. We're just trying to sharpen it because you're onto something big.
Thank
I'm
you.
just
I know,
okay.
it can get confusing, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, just a bit. Okay, cool.
Mm.
All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Make it a wonderful day, and thank you again for being here.
All right.
Thank you,
Okay.
Claire.
Hey, nice meeting you, Jeff.
Yeah, nice meeting you too, Michael.
See you guys in class next week.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.